Hello learners, today we are going to discuss about the species interaction within the communities. This unit focuses on the interaction between living communities and the different kinds of interactions in a living community, how they benefit from each other. So we all know that the plants and the animals, they live together in a community, they share a common resource. They depend on each other and cooperate and interact with each other. The dominant plants define the conditions. The producers exert a dominating influence on the community. For example, in a terrestrial ecosystem, in a forest, the trees are the dominating species. Even the forest has a specific name, like we had discussed in the earlier unit also about the sal forest, the pine forest, according to the dominating species which occur in that particular community. Because in a sal forest, the sal trees or the Shorea robusta was the dominating species in that particular community. The dominating species even have specific names such as sal forest. If they are dominated by the pine trees, then they are called the pine forest. So they are the largest in size, or they are the highest in size or highest in number among the other life forms, as compared to the other organisms or the life forms which are existing in that particular community. So in a forest, different kinds of trees modify the local environmental conditions under their canopy. The microclimatic conditions, they create new conditions for the survival of different plants and animals which may not survive in the absence of microclimate created by the canopies. So if the huge trees or the large trees do not provide a canopy, it may become difficult for the survival of the other plants and animals. Now, the dominant plants, they have a control over the area and govern the community composition. Like your dominant plants, like we had discussed, the sal trees, the pine trees, they provide a microclimatic condition for other plants to survive. Now, there are different kinds of interaction. Each individual organism interacts with the biotic and the abiotic components of the environment. This we have already discussed in the previous chapters. Now, we are going to focus only on the living communities. So, the interaction in a living community are of three types. The first one is predation. What is predation? So, a predator is an organism that feeds directly on another organism where the prey may not be killed or it may be killed. Some of the consumers also come under the predators. Your herbivores, the carnivores and the omnivores, they are also predators. The parasites which live on the host organism and derive their food from them without killing them also come under predation. Pathogens which cause disease to the host organism also fall under this category. Either they kill the organism or the organism may not be killed also. So, when a bacteria or a virus or when a fungi, they attack a host, So the host may be a plant also, the host may be an animal, the host may be a human being also. The pathogens, they cause disease to the host organism, and so they also come under the category of predation, where either it may kill the prey or the prey may not be killed. So this is an example of a predation, an ergot feeding on the fish. Now, predation determines a balance in communities. The adult prey, their eggs and the young ones serve as food for the predator. The predator may kill the adult prey, or either they may eat their eggs or their young ones. Which one is consumed by the predator is crucial for the regeneration of the prey population. So, the prey species, they develop certain strategies to protect themselves or to survive from the predators, either by regenerating the lost part or developing a tough, thick exterior. And in plants, sometimes they produce toxic substances to escape from the predators. Like in plants, some plants produce chemical substances. When the herbivore eats the plants, the herbivores, because of the toxic effect of the substance the plant secretes, the herbivores themselves get killed. So these are some of the strategies developed by the prey to survive from the predators. There are thorns, there are trichomes, etc., where the plants protect itself from the herbivores. And now you have is the competition. There exists antagonistic interaction within species of a community. They compete with each other for the basic natural resources available for their survival. So there exists a competition between these within the species of a community, and so there is an antagonistic interaction where one organism tries to inhibit or prevents the growth of another organism within the species or between species also. The animals, they compete for food, space and reproduction. The plants for light, nutrients and also space. Now, some plants, they produce certain toxic substances which do not allow any plants to grow in its vicinity. They compete with each other for their survival. So there are two types of competition: the intraspecific competition and the interspecific competition. Intraspecific competition occurs between members of the same species, while interspecific competition occurs within members of other species. Now, the plants, they cope with the intraspecific competition in the following ways. Their main aim is food, to get the food, the nutrients and the space. The seeds of many plants, they are unable to germinate and establish under the shade of the parent plant. There are diverse seed dispersal mechanisms for wider dissemination to further places. Light, feathery or hairy seeds are seen floating in the air, which represents active dispersal mechanism. So the plants have adopted certain mechanism for the dispersal of the seeds for wider dissemination to further places, so that the seeds are being dispersed. So in this photograph, you can see that the seeds are dispersed by the wind to far up places, and the seeds have developed, they have modified structures which are light feathery structures, enabling the seeds are light so that they can travel to far up places. So you can see here the hairy or the feathery structure developed so that it can be easily carried by the wind. And there are different mechanisms of dispersal of the seeds. They may be carried away by the hairs of the animals also, when the seeds stick on the hairs of the animals also. So the seeds are carried to far off places wherever the animals travel. They are dispersed by wind, they are dispersed by water, etc. So the plants, they cope with certain intraspecific competition in the following ways. Some of the plants, as already told, they secrete certain substances which inhibit the growth of other plants in its vicinity. They secrete certain toxic substances which do not allow other trees to grow in its vicinity. So they occupy the dominant area. Now the animals also exhibit intraspecific competition among themselves for their survival. They define their nesting or the home site and defend themselves against intruders. They do not allow any intruders to come near their shelter or their nesting places. The birds as well as the invertebrates, they spread out or they spaced out and avoid competition among members of their population. You can see the sparrows, how they defend and guide their territory during the breeding season. Their area, they have their own territory which are occupied by the mated pair or a family. So these birds as well as the animals, the invertebrates, etc., they try to avoid competition among members of their population by spacing out and defining their or guarding their territory. Some of their animals also secrete certain substances to delineate and mark their territory. The third type of this interaction is symbiosis. Symbiosis, what does symbiosis refer to? When two species of an organism exist together in close association, they show a symbiotic relationship which is a result of the co-evolution of the symbiotic species over the geological time scale. So there are three kinds of symbiotic association amongst the organisms. The first one is commensalism, the second one is mutualism, and the third one is your parasitism. Now this is an example of commensalism. One of the partner is benefited while the other is neither benefited nor harmed. It is a relationship which is commonly seen in the sessile organisms. So you can see a beautiful orchid, a red vanda, growing on the tree trunk. Now in this particular photograph, the epiphyte which grows on the branches of other plants, now the orchid derives its nutrients by absorbing moisture from the atmosphere and other dissolved substances, while the tree trunk is neither harmed nor benefited. Only there is a relationship between the tree and the orchid or the epiphyte in that the other partner gets benefited while the tree is neither benefited nor it is harmed by the orchid or the epiphyte. So this is an example of commensalism where such kind of relationship is commonly seen in sessile organisms. So neither the orchid is moving nor the tree is moving. It occurs in sessile organisms. The relationship shown by the sea anemone and the clownfish is another example of commensalism. So the sea anemone are the marine animals that have stinging tentacles that can paralyze other predators that feed on the clownfish. But the clownfish has developed certain mechanisms in which they can stay among the tentacles of the sea anemone without harming it. So it provides, the sea anemone provides shelter for this clownfish. So this is another example of commensalism. Now in mutualism, the kind of interaction is of an advanced type, or a relationship in which both the partners are completely dependent on one another. Both the partners, they benefit from one another. For example, you have the rhizobium growing in the roots of the leguminous plants, which fixes atmospheric nitrogen, and mycorrhiza, which is the mutualistic association between a fungus with the roots of the higher plants. So both the partners, the fungus as well as the plant, are mutually benefited. Mycorrhiza, what does it do? It increases the ability of the plant to absorb minerals such as phosphorus from the soil, and the plants in turn provide photosynthate in return. The lichens, which is an association between an algae and a fungi, is also an example of mutualism. Another example of mutualism is shown by the genus Acacia and the stinging ants. In Acacia species, the modified leaves, they bear a pair of hollow thorns. You can see in the picture, you can see the hole on the thorn of the acacia, modified leaf of acacia. The leaf has been modified into a thorn, and they bear a pair of hollow structure, and in this hollow thorn, the ants, the stinging ants, they find shelter, or they inhabit this hollow region, or the leaf, the modified leaf. Now this provides a safe site for the larvae of the ants. The ants, they also eat the nectar produced by the nectaries which are at the base of the leaf petiole, while the ants in return or in turn protect the plant by attacking and stinging organisms that feed on them, such as the herbivores. So these stinging ants, they attack the herbivores when they try to eat up this acacia plant. Thus, both the partners are benefited. So this kind of interaction is an example of mutualism. Another type of interaction is parasitism. It is a type of interaction in which one organism benefits while the other organism has a negative effect on its growth and survival. So the parasites, they may be microparasites also, they may be macroparasites also. It has a negative effect on the growth of the organism, the other organism. One is benefited, but the other has a negative effect. So under the category of the microparasites are bacteria and fungi, while macroparasites include the roundworms and the tapeworms, which are endoparasites, and the ticks, the mosquitoes and the mites come under ectoparasites. There are also other parasitic vascular plants which derive their food completely or partially from the host plant. For example, you have sandalwood, cuscuta, dodder, or you commonly or locally call it as amarbel. So these are plants, parasitic vascular plants, which derive their nutrients from the host plant. So they also come under the category of parasitism. So you can see here, this is a parasitic vascular plant. The yellow colored thread-like structure is cuscuta, that is your dodder, is an example of a partial stem parasite. What it does, it derives its nutrients from the host plant by sucking the nutrients by producing a certain structure which you call it the hostoria. So you can see in this photograph, in the anatomical section, host and the parasite, that is the dodder, sucks the nutrients right through the xylem elements and then derive the nutrients from the host plant. So it can be any host plant. You can see in the streets growing around dodder attacking these vascular plants. So there exists a competition among organisms, and competition existing among organisms is found to be more in those that share the same common source of food and space. When you share the same common source of food and space, then more competition arises. What do the different types of these symbiotic interactions have in common? What are their characteristic features? So these are some of the idea or some of the summary of what is being discussed in this unit. Thank you.